Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and Little Rock Public Radio.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks very much for being with us. The Razorback football program turned upside down and inside out. 4 firings and an undecided, uncertain outlook. In a few moments, we'll get an update and perhaps some predictions from a pair of football scholars. First, turmoil of a different sort. Another contentious partisan showdown over federal spending and a tariff war that has farmers in Arkansas and elsewhere on edge. We're joined up top tonight in this edition by Senator John Boozman of Arkansas, chair of his chamber's Agriculture Committee. Senator, as always, we thank you for coming aboard.
No, thank you, Steve, so much for having me, as always.
Well, we have a situation here where, two sides don't seem to be budging. Some federal employees and some Medicaid beneficiaries are caught in the middle, among other government services anyway. Do you see an off-ramp?
There will be an off-ramp. There always is. To be honest, I don't see how we're going to get there right now. But, we're in a situation where we'd like to take the next few weeks up until about Thanksgiving and then work through our appropriations bills, do things right. In order to do that, though, the Democrats, Senator Schumer, has said we can't do that unless you agree to $1 trillion worth of spending, and we're just not going to do that. So we're at an impasse. I think the demands that he's making are unreasonable. I think also that during the Biden years, there were 13 continuing resolutions, much like this. It's not like anything's being added. We're just going to keep spending money exactly like we did last year. So there's no games being played. But, people supported that. I supported those. I think when you close the government down, you're basically holding the American people hostage. You're holding our people that work for government hostage. And it's really a difficult situation. We'll have elderly people calling the office soon, asking if their Social Security is going to be affected. And again, it's just not fair. It's not something that we need to be doing. So hopefully we'll get off of this and actually solve the problem and agree on the spending that we need to do. But we need to do it the right way.
Well, the loyal opposition senator is arguing that it is the majority party, your party, that's being unreasonable on both sides of the Capitol, that what's at issue here is health care. And they say, what is unreasonable about that?
Well, health care is important, certainly. I'm a health care provider. I know how difficult it is, and I see the insurance rates going up in Arkansas and throughout the country. On the other hand, you deal with health care in the right way. You do it in committee. You bring it to the floor, and we discuss that. But the idea of coming up, in a few days prior and saying, well, we're not going to vote for your bill to keep the government running unless you include this bill without, virtually any discussion. So I think there's some room for continuing the subsidies that were done during the pandemic. These are pandemic subsidies that were hooked onto health care. Well, the pandemic's over, but it needs a lot of reform. It needs a lot of work so that we can do it right. But again, hooking this onto this bill is not right. The only reason it's being done is because Senator Schumer was embarrassed the last time he helped out and did the right thing, keeping the government open. So he's playing the tough guy right now, and I think he's backed himself into a corner that's going to be difficult to get out of.
Well, in terms of that, sir, the vice president, I think on Wednesday morning, came out and said, all right, if you guys pass the bill, talking to the majority or the minority, if you guys pass the bill, we will reopen talks on extending the subsidies for the marketplace. Is that realistic, though? I mean, you're talking about a near-term real acceleration in terms of rates.
Well, it is realistic. And again, some work's going to need to be done. And all of the, this has to do with health care. We had pandemic increases for food stamps, things like that, a number of different things. Those have all gone away, all of those subsidies. But the Democrats have latched onto this and again are demanding in a situation that we're simply not going to do it is being held hostage by them for a matter of 4 or 5 weeks. So, as the vice president said, let's do our appropriations bills. We can do 2 or 3 things at the same time, and let's talk about health care. But we're not going to do it this way, and they know we're not this way. We're playing games.
In the interim, sir, what message would you offer to Medicaid beneficiaries who say their premiums, and they seem to be backed up by some of the Medicaid people, that their premiums are going to just skyrocket, in some cases double? Do you have a message for them? Obviously, Social Security is going to continue, but maybe not Medicaid. Or at an affordable level anyway. Would you have a message for them?
Well, again, this goes back to the pre-pandemic days. The people that we're really concerned about that are getting a really good deal are the higher income people that this included. So you've got a whole bunch of new people in the system now that weren't in. They're higher income. And again, we just need to look and see who's getting this. What we don't want are people that could actually afford insurance or get it through their company, but it's cheaper to get it through the government. Then you're hurting the people that need it the most, those at the lower end, which Medicaid really was designed for.
Switch subjects if we can, sir. You got an awful lot of soybean farmers and corn farmers. Right now, you're talking about being held hostage. They're being held hostage right now to a tariff situation. Do you see any relief?
I do. I think it's a good story in the sense that the Agriculture Committee has worked really hard to educate members. People like our congressional delegation that have been so helpful, and again, in educating members, essentially people that are from farm states. And the reality is that's most of the country, have really made a case to the administration, Department of Agriculture, their fellow members. And as a result, the vast majority, in fact, I'd say virtually everyone in Congress now understands that our farmers need their help. And so because of that, I think in the next week or so, we'll get an announcement. President Trump has come out and said that he's very much in favor of this, that he is going to do it, that we're going to come up with some kind of financial package to get them through this time. The big bill that was passed in reconciliation, it was a bill that had probably 80% of the farm bill in it. And what we were able to do there is increase the risk management tools. The investment that it was made to agriculture is more than has been done in decades. That's all great. It's really going to help them with risk going forward. Problem is they won't get those dollars until about this time next year. They're going to need some funding at the end of this year for a number of different reasons. You mentioned markets. They're in turmoil right now. But also their input costs are very, very high. Interest rates are high. Commodity prices are very, very low. And then we have problems with the markets. And this is something that's been brewing. This is when you take this year and the 2 prior years, the 3 years together, this will be the greatest drop in farm income ever. And so it's something that's been brewing. The Chinese have been working with the Brazilians to get their infrastructure in order where they can produce a crop that can service them. And essentially they don't need us right now. So they've turned into a fairly reliable trading partner to an adversary right now. So all of these things make it such that if you're growing something, unless you're in the livestock business, you're losing money. It costs more to produce the crop than you can actually sell it for.
Has the president's tariff policy, sir, particularly involving the Chinese, has it backed the American farm community into a corner that it can't get out of?
Yeah. Yes and no. If you look at the EU and a number of other countries, in fact, Governor Sanders was able to secure a deal with Taiwan the other day. So there's been a lot of positive things like that with different countries. The big dog in the soybean market, though, they probably buy 70% of the soybeans in many different parts of the country, Arkansas included, a huge customer. They've said no. They're using it as a tool, much like you and I are at the age we can remember when we had the Russians doing the same thing periodically. So they're using it as an act. So, but there's some pros and there's some cons. We just need to get it straight. And in the short term, regardless of what's gotten us in this situation, we need to help farmers out. If you remember, Steve, at the end of last year, before President Trump was president, we actually provided $10 billion in economic relief and $23 billion in disaster aid to our farmers, which is a huge amount of money. And again, they had a terrible year last year. They had a terrible year the previous year. This is really a perfect storm for them. But we definitely need to help them.
But are we not asking, though, the taxpayers, though, to subsidize, in effect, make up the farmers' losses for a policy that the administration was cautioned against?
Well, this administration wasn't even in office 2 years ago when farmers had a terrible year. The taxpayers did help with farmers last year before President Trump was installed. And now we've got the same thing. And looking forward into next year, even if you solve the tariff problem, which we didn't have, the last 2 years, it's still going to be significant problems with agriculture. So we've got to get new markets. We've got to look at what we're growing. There's all kinds of things to look at. But no, I certainly would not blame it all on the president. That's just incorrect.
Well, one more change of subject now. As we mentioned up top, there's been a little upheaval at Fayetteville. Now, as an old offensive Razorback lineman yourself, you want to make a prediction for the rest of the season. Do you see an off-ramp, or what's your assessment?
It's really sad. I was a Sam Pittman fan. I think he's a good coach in lots of ways, but it just the last half of the Notre Dame game was just terrible, and so I understand why Hunter Yurchek did what he did, and it was I think it was the right move. We'll have to see what Coach Petrino does in the interim, and then somebody that's got a lot more wisdom than me is going to have to make a decision who the next coach is. But it's actually helped us a little bit because people are talking about that more in Arkansas than they are anything else, and some of these other things are sliding by. So, but it's a big deal for the state, but I'll predict this, Steve. I think we'll beat some people in the next several games that people didn't think we could beat.
Senator John Boozman, as always, we thank you for your time. Thanks for coming on. Come back soon.
Well, thank you, sir, very much.
Absolutely. And we'll be back in just a moment with a little bit more on our sports page. We are back with our occasional sports page. Last-minute fumbles cost the Razorbacks the two previous games, but the loss against Notre Dame was one long fumble, and it was enough to prompt the firing of the head coach and, within a matter of hours, 3 subordinates. So what now? A pair of familiar faces are here with their analysis. Beau Wilcox, who writes about the Hogs for Arkansas Times when he isn't distracted by practicing law, and once a Razorback, always a Razorback, David Bazzel of 103.7 The Buzz. Gentlemen, I don't know how else to start. Baz, we'll start with you. Where are we and where are we going?
Well, I think you could say, Steve, that Sam Pittman is leaving the program in a better place than what it was with Chad Morris. I mean, that was the lowest of the low. You only win 2 games each of those 2 years, no conference games. And that was about as bad as I've ever seen it in my 40 years here in the state. So I think he left it in a better place. But it's a different game now. It's a different program now in the sense of what drives it with money and NIL and transfer portal. And I think that caught up with him in the sense that the money has not been there, which is not all his fault. But it was obvious we were, outmatched against Notre Dame. I think they might have, because Hunter Yurachek did hire him. I think Hunter wanted to give him the chance to try to work his way out. But you can't give up 42 points and a half to Notre Dame in a nationally televised game and a full house at your home stadium. So I think it was inevitable. Everybody knew it. You didn't have to know anything about football to know that that era is over, and now we go back in time, and there's Bobby Petrino standing on the sideline.
Yeah. That was the tipping point. Beau Wilcox.
Well, I think as David said, Sam did leave it in a better shape than it was in. It's not a bad program. I think people recognize that it is a lot harder now to win, not just in the SEC and not just in this day and age, but any level of college sports and college football in particular. And, I think that we had some good moments. Tennessee game last year jumps out for me. That was a treat to be there and enjoy that. 3-0 is in bowls for what little that may be worth. That's something he can hang his hat on. But it was time. Baz said it well. You cannot have a game like they had on Saturday against Notre Dame. First game ever against the Irish in Fayetteville, packed house. You're coming off 2 tough losses, granted, but as I understood it, the atmosphere was fantastic, and it was empty within a matter of an hour.
Who would have thought 11 years ago that Mr. Petrino would be back at Fayetteville, even as, well, of course, it was 2 years ago he's brought in as the offensive coordinator. Do we know what his chances are? We have a nationwide search, according to Mr. Yurachek, for a new head coach. Is Petrino in the running?
He is. I mean, I think if you looked at the press release, Beau, as you know, every word is important in a press release. Yep. And Hunter Yurachek made it clear. Bobby Petrino is interested in becoming the head coach. Will be considered.
Well, just to put it bluntly, is that window dressing or
No. I think it is clear. And legally, just to be able to get him back last year, I think there had to be some reconfiguring on the bylaws or whatever it is to be. He was fired with cause back in 2012. So, I think he's in the running, Steve, but the problem is it's a very tough hill he's got to climb. With this schedule the rest of the year, I think 5 of the teams are ranked. You still have the same players that you have. Can you make them a little bit better? Yes. But no, the fact that he's even in the running is just a crazy story that you couldn't make it up if you were doing a movie, that he's actually back on the sideline. You can say he's an interim, but next Saturday he will be the head coach of the Razorbacks again.
Well, instead of a brief, how about a screenplay, Beau?
I think that you could definitely write something, and I don't know what kind of genre it would be. A little bit of horror, a little bit of comedy, a little bit of everything in here. Petrino, I've always been a bit of a skeptic. I think that if he's an exceptional offensive play caller, I don't think anybody doubts that, but there's very few people that can even remember who his defensive coordinator was, Willie Robinson. And as I understood it, after he was discharged, he has not worked in coaching again. That may have been a decision for him to retire, but defense was always second fiddle. And so right now, the defense is a disaster, and I don't think anybody would characterize it differently. So I don't know what you can do in 7 games with the personnel he's got. It's going to be very interesting. I agree with Baz. He's a viable candidate. Would he be my first choice? Not necessarily, but and I think the one issue there that I keep coming back to is, that was 13 years ago, and he's in his mid-60s now, and the game has changed to some extent. And his last, viable head coaching, job was at Louisville, where he had one of the greatest athletes ever in Lamar Jackson, and he went 17-9 over 2 years. Nothing spectacular, nothing terrible. We'd take 17-9 over 2 years right now in a heartbeat.
Yeah, Baz and I were talking just before the broadcast that at 64, I believe.
That's right.
He is I think the oldest coach in the SEC right now. So it's not likely that we'll see a Petrino era, even if he does. Or what do I know?
That's right, Steve. And I think the other thing, and let's be clear, I think there's a good portion of supporters, donors that do not want him as head coach. And so, even if he were to win 2 or 3 games, you have a group that are saying, age, we've already been down that road, let's start new, we need a new face, an up-and-comer. So even if he does well, you're going to find there's a group of out there, and probably a good chunk of folks who do not want that move to be made. So he's got that he's dealing with. But if he comes in and does miracles, which I'm with you, Beau, I think it's going to be a long shot to do. he's still in the mix, though.
Well, let's start with this. Beau, he's got, 7 games left, so you want to make a prediction?
I do think that we are going to win 3.
Wow.
I don't know how and I don't know why I feel that, but I feel like it just suits the drama of this this coaching carousel. It would actually be completely realistic too for them to go 4-3, make a minor bowl, and then all of a sudden people have energy around him. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm like Baz. I think it's a very big long shot that this team is going to go anywhere at this point because of what you saw on Saturday. And I know that was a terrible game and a terrible moment. But let's face it, it had been building to that. A team that has not learned to win close games, once they get their backs against a wall, I think you see what happens. And so I think that, Petrino is going to instill some toughness back in them, and I think that's a good thing. I think they'll play hard for him. I really do. But the question is going to be, can they stop anybody, and can this offense start generating points instead of yards?
Yeah. Baz, you're 7 games. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really difficult. There are a couple games like Auburn, Mississippi State. I think they might have a shot. But you've got the next 2 weeks, you've got a Tennessee team that's one of the best offenses in the nation at their place. That's going to be next to impossible to win. Then you've got Texas A&M coming to Fayetteville, number 6 in the nation. But then after you get Auburn, Mississippi at home, and then you have to go on the road, Texas, go on the road, LSU, Missouri. I just think it's going to be real tough. It's a fascinating story, though. It is just the fact that we're in this situation. I do find it, Steve, in this state, it reminds me why I came here as a 16-year-old or 17-year-old at the time, is the importance of Razorback sports in this state, and how, what I do for a living is that this becomes the state narrative for a few days, that this is what everybody talks about.
Can that, the Razorback program it's been, for generations. It's a cultural institute.
Sure,
it's a
right.
social institute.
Right.
Can, in this NIL era, can that be maintained? Baz, you used the word. You were the first to use it about money.
Yeah, I think we've seen. I mean, we've got some pretty big companies in this state that have already stepped up. John Tyson, you look what he did. The reason we have Coach Calipari is John Tyson. Frank Fletcher, who is one of the reasons we have the quarterback Taylor Green's been pretty public about it. So I think you can. I think we're at a disadvantage. If you look at the population, the number of Fortune 500 companies we don't have as many as Texas and Georgia and Alabama and Florida. But I think this state loves its sports enough that we can create enough of a money trail where I think we can be competitive. In football, we've already shown, Steve, we're competitive with everybody in baseball, basketball, all the sports track. Football is the only one.
Well, let me stay right there, because you were a part of this. You were the MC at a program a few days ago in which the AD, Mr. Yurachek, said, well, I'm not sure we're set up for a championship. The blowback was immediate.
Yeah, you don't want to say that. You may think that. You don't want to say that publicly because it undercuts, what you're trying to do, whether it be recruiting or whatever, your program. What do you mean? And that was an indictment of his leadership. Why aren't we? And, of course, losing doesn't help. When you're not winning, it's tough to go ask people for money. So that's part of it. But I think, too, where they fumbled coming out of the chute with NIL. They hired some people that were not the kind of people you need leading that NIL program. So they came out behind the 8 ball, and they're still catching up. That's why this next hire is going to be so important. You need somebody like a Coach Cal that will inspire people to get out their checkbook.
Yurachek, he said, his words, brutally honest. Beau?
Not a fan of what he said. I mean, I don't think you...
Was he speaking a hard truth?
In my opinion, no, and that's the problem. I think that to be able to say that is one thing, to think it's another thing, and then, like David said, you go out publicly and make that statement while you have a football team playing. And if I recall, this was after just the Ole Miss loss, and that was a ranked opponent on the road, and we missed 2 field goals and fumbled a chance to possibly steal it at the end. And he says that, and I think that there's no doubt that got immediately back to everybody on the staff, to the players, and I just thought that was a disastrous thing to say. Is it accurate? Maybe. With that said, though, I fail to, and I think that the frustration, talking about the success in other sports is what makes our frustration as Hog fans so much more about the football program. If the resources are being committed to all these other programs and they're doing well and thriving, why is football, the bell cow program, getting the short shrift? And I don't think anybody really can understand that. Yes, the money is a huge factor, and I think that part of what he was saying is correct. But once again, I also thought it was a statement that just cut him off at his own hamstrings. You know, I think that he basically said, we have a problem here, we don't have enough funding, and he is the AD. So I felt like it was a little bit of
so much he had to go before the Board of Trustees. He had some of his favorable board members say, you need to come in and, you know, reset what you said. I mean, how about that? I mean, he's having to go before the Board of Trustees and say, I didn't mean to say it that way. Pretty big statement.
All because you asked him.
No.
Some changes may be coming to that NIL program dynamic in the days ahead, and we'll have you guys back to talk about that on a later broadcast. Right now, that does it for us for this week. As always, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and Little Rock Public Radio.